A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror.
And happy Sunday, and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, June 22nd, 2025. Jesus Christ, Val. Val Atkinson is here. Val, yesterday was first day of summer. Yep. Everybody's all happy and giddy in the northern hemisphere because things are warmed up and you can get out with your family, so on and so forth. Pride events were going on all across the country. Just stuff. I saw people everywhere. We're in the new studios in downtown Raleigh. I'm in a different setting than the last time, but I'm down in the other studio. And you'd think, people would be happy. But we're not this morning, Val, because at some point, Donald John Trump, the leader of the free world, decides he wants to help Israel out and drop some bombs on some places. Let's look at some video, and they'll talk about those places that Donald John Trump decided to drop bombs on, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of detail at this point. Here's a couple things that I would take away from the president's Truth Social. Number one, he said we have completed are very successful. That to me would indicate that this was sort of the bombers went in, or potentially other aircraft, most likely other aircraft as well, went in here, they conducted this bombing run, and they got out. They've cleared Iranian airspace. That's generally the point at which military officials or the White House, I guess, would release any kind of information once they are clear of that potentially dangerous airspace over Iran. What we don't know is exactly what was used here. So if we look at some of the factors that we've seen today, we know that some B-2 bombers, a handful of them took off from Whiteman Air Force Base over Missouri. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. That is enough time for them to get to Iran. They have the ability, Jose, to fly extremely long distances. So we're talking like 3-day missions, refueling in the air, never actually touching ground.
So, Val, there's 3 facilities in Iran that are part of their nuclear program. The Iranians, and even Tulsi Gabbard, said that they were not close to having a bomb. But Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth, and I guess they let Marco Rubio in the room because he's standing up there behind Donald Trump, decide that they're going to go ahead and bomb Iran anyway. So let me stop talking. What the hell's happening, Val? For real. What's the real deal? What's actually happening here?
What's actually happening, Ed, is something that you and I have been talking about for years. And that is the secret plan, the goal that Western countries have. And that is the westernization of, I guess you call this thing, planet Earth. The westernization. I mean, it's when the other 89% of the planet don't look like you, when the 89% of people on planet Earth are non-white, non-European, you get kind of scared, kind of skittish at certain things that are going on. And many people that look at this and say that the only way that these 11 percenters can feel safe is that when everybody else is practicing their culture and look upon them as leaders. So that's where they're trying to go. They need to get to a point where the whole world has been westernized. That means that their culture is the one that's being practiced, and they are the ones that implemented this westernization. So they must be allowed to be the leaders. Then they will feel safe. This 11% will feel safe. So it's about the business of feeling safe, Ed. This is just one step in that long process that started at the end of World War II. But that's what it's about. And all of the things that have happened in the Middle East over the past 25 years or more can be really laid at the feet of those who have as their goal the westernization of the entire planet. The Middle East stands in the way of that, right?
Let's go to something immediate, and then we'll backtrack a little bit, because I need for you to give me the listeners and the viewers some historical context. Iran is not like the rest of the Middle East, and mainly because they're Shias. There's two big strains of Islam, and it's Shiism and Sunni, and people who have any sense at all know that the Saudis and all those other folks who are aligned against Iran are aligned against Iran because they don't like them because they have a different branch of Islam. Now, if you were to ask most Americans, they wouldn't even understand that part of it, right? And then the Russians are aligned with Iran. Can you explain to me how, and we know that Trump's first visit when he made, the first time he was president, and the second was to Saudi Arabia. And he's got a close alliance with Netanyahu, so all the stuff you talked about with, supporting Israel. Why are Americans so stupid and still can't figure that out? That Trump is doing the bidding of Saudi Arabia as much as he's doing the bidding for Iran. And how does that put him with Putin? Because Putin doesn't support any of this, I'm sure. He can't make a call to Putin now and say, hey, are we still friends? I mean, can you put any of that into context?
It's very difficult, simply because the first thing is that Putin right now is involved in a war himself with Ukraine. And if he were not, I'm not sure if the United States would be bombing Iran right now, because they would be afraid of what the Russians might do. But they know right now the Russians got their hands full and they are not going to step in. I would imagine and I would assume that before we struck Iran, a courtesy call was made to Putin saying, hey, we're not dropping nuclear weapons. We just want to knock out their nuclear weapons. So I don't want to start World War III. So we're going to attack them. So don't feel that you necessarily have to attack us. And we'll see you on the other side. And they went ahead and bombed Iran because they knew that Putin's hands were tied and he couldn't do anything. Iran has to be feeling right now, well, I don't have anybody on my side. I signed all these papers with Russia, and the big US of A come in and bomb me when they get ready and sick their little dog on me, Israel, to do anything they want to do. And I ain't got nobody come to my aid. So they're feeling really bad about that right now, but that's the way it is. Henry Kissinger used to call it the triangular effect, and which he really meant some other kind of geometric kind of design, because it's really not playing just three people, but several people at the same time against one another for the benefit of the puppeteer himself, in this case, the United States of America.
Yeah, I want to remind you, you're listening to or you're viewing The Deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. It's Sunday, June 22nd. You could wake up and say, well, we're right back into it, right? We're back in the Middle East. We're into another conflict in the Middle East. Donald Trump promised us that he wouldn't do that. One of the reasons for electing him, he said, was because Kamala Harris was going to have us in another war in the Middle East within 6 months of, them being in office. And it's 6 months. He was on time. He just had the wrong president. Yeah, he should have said himself. But on a serious note, Val, I think the world gets really upset a lot when there is conflict in the Middle East because of, and I'll put the elephant, I'm gonna let it out into the room. A lot of it has to do with our religious inclinations in the West towards Jerusalem, right? That's supposed to be the center of the world, and if you're a Christian, you believe that the return of Jesus is imminent, and so on and so forth, and the whole notion about protecting Israel and so on and so forth, and being against Muslims and yada, yada, yada. You throw all that into the mix. A lot of people get real concerned that there could be a conflagration of World War III. I think things are a little bit different, though, now than before, because if we go all the way back to, say, the end of the First World War, when the Levant was being carved up, when you got Iraq and some of these countries formed because they didn't exist before, you couldn't get from one of those countries to another without going days at a time. Now I can get to the Middle East in 18 hours because they said they flew planes from Missouri straight to Iran for 18 straight hours to do the bombing. The world's a lot closer together, I guess, is my point, right, than at the end of World War One. And there's 8 billion people in the world, and I would say probably 7.5 billion don't care about Israel and don't care about Iran. Can you talk to me about, do we overplay sometimes how important the conflict with Israel and its neighbors are compared to, say, the conflict between China and Taiwan? I mean, there's billions of people that are tired of it, or the conflict between China and India.
Sure. Well, the thing about it is that the whole religion piece plays larger in the area of importance during election time, because this is a piece that the right wing, Republicans in particular, they use to get the evangelical vote. And they talk about the rapture, and they talk about making sure Israel is taken care of, and those who believe that Israel is going to be the place of the new reckoning and da 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 da. That's for evangelicals. These are for the Christian right who go to the polls in great numbers and do what they got to do and vote for Republicans. After the election is over, you don't hear a lot of that kind of talk, because the right wing, far right Republicans who are using evangelicals to gain office, they have another reason for being in the Middle East. And it has very little to do with religion. It has more to do with the whole business of westernizing that part of the world. They would love to see a Mar-a-Lago type entertainment piece somewhere in Gaza, on the West Bank and the Golan Heights, wherever they want it to be. Now it could be in Iran, you know, that we could have a wonderful golf course there in Iran someplace that Westerners can visit, and without being worried about women having to wear hijabs while they're visiting that place, without having to worry about whether women can drive cars or those kinds of things. That's what they want. So we should not lose really focus and view on the fact that this is a long-term, long-range goal of the West. And we can throw all the salt and pepper we want on it to give it a different flavor. When we talk about religion, when we talk about atomic weapons, when we talk about threats to Israel, no, I'm not being fooled by that. It's still a piece of subgrade meat. I don't care how much salt and pepper you put on it, it's subgrade. And the truth of the matter is that it's about westernization of the Middle East. So let's not get fooled and let's not get distracted. That's what they're about. They're continuing on this way, and left to their own devices, Ed, if we go to sleep tonight and we don't wake up for another 25 or 30 years, I think we will see a westernized Middle East. I don't see anything or any country or anybody that's going to stop that from happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of time and how.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to fall. They're going to go the way of the indigenous people of Australia, going to go the way of the Native Americans in North America, going to go the way of the Mayas in Middle America and South America. I mean, it's been happening all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Westerners come in and they see people who don't look like them, don't act like them, don't worship like them or whatever, and they either have to be destroyed or converted.
Yeah. Well, that's what I fear the most, Val. We've talked about it over the 30 plus years that we've been doing things together on the radio or here on the deal or whatever. And capitalism is kind of rotten at its core. Now, again, we all know that we have to make money to live because that's the way the system works. But at its core, what this is trying to convince people that they need to work for the man, and then that means only certain men can have stuff. And when those men want stuff and don't want anybody else to have it, they go to war to protect their interests. If you look at all the conflicts, particularly since 2000, when Dick Cheney and all those people are trying to tell you that Saddam Hussein had something to do with the World Trade Center, when we knew that it was the Saudi Arabians. Well, you can't go to war with Saudi Arabia. They're the linchpin to you, doing the strategy that you're talking about. Saudi Arabia is more than perfectly willing to destroy Iraq and Iran so that they could put whatever there that the West wants so that they can maintain what they're doing, right? So you're totally right on that, and I wish people understood that a little bit more. But it is what it is. I hear some music in my ear. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Val, I'm going to ask you to talk about those countries that do have weapons that could blow up the whole world, who they are, and why we should be concerned. And then also, as we always do, we always give you a little bit of history lesson. So we want to do that when we come back. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
One, two, three, four. Sometimes I try to make my body be still. 3, 2, 1. 1, 2.
We train to get up on the equipment and do the routine. What we don't train for is the moment before.
1.
Your mind is the most underrated but strongest muscle.
4, 3, 2, 1.
My goal is the finish line, and I've come too far to stop.
4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3.
Back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We're so happy you took time to join us. We hope that you continue to do that. Make sure you tell people to subscribe to the program everywhere, Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple, wherever you find your fine podcasts. Also on Facebook, if you want to go there. Got some exciting news. I'll go ahead and let the cat out the bag, Val. We've bought a radio station. So we're going to be back on the radio again in eastern North Carolina, but again, we're going to use that as a platform to launch other programs. So that's WENC radio down in Whiteville, North Carolina. Covers Whiteville, Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, Lumberton. So if you're in North Carolina, you know where those places are because you used to go into the beach. That's 12:20 a.m. We hope that that'll be up and running in August. So keep track of that so you'll be able to hear us on there. But you'll also be able to hear us all over the world because we'll be streaming those programs. And one thing that you won't have to worry about, Val, is not being able to say what you want because we're going to have multiple platforms. We're going to have, a regular terrestrial radio, and then we'll also have whatever we have here online as well. When we left, Val, I said I wanted you to talk about who has nuclear weapons, why those countries have them, and why they don't want other countries to join this club. So let's start there. Tell me the countries that have weapons, what their stockpiles are like, and then why do they not want anybody else to join this club? And I would be more specific, why does the United States not want anybody else to join this club?
Well, right now, the United States, the UK, and France and Israel are the four countries that come under the umbrella of the West that have nuclear weapons. The United States, the UK, France, and Israel. Now, a lot of people ask the question, how did Israel get nuclear weapons so fast? Did they go through the process that Iran is trying to go through now? Let me go back and remind people that before apartheid ended in South Africa had nuclear weapons. And the question may come up, what happened to those nuclear weapons? Because they did not revert to the new South Africa that's being controlled by Black Africans. They don't have nuclear weapons. So something happened to those nuclear weapons that they had. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. There are people who suggest, without proof, that some of them may have ended up in Israel. Be that as it may, I don't know. But those are the four Western countries who have nuclear weapons. Then there are two other countries that don't align with the West necessarily, or don't align with the non-Western countries, and they are India and Pakistan. Now, India and Pakistan had a spat here a few weeks ago, and everybody was concerned that here are two nuclear weapon having countries, and what's going to happen if they start lobbing nuclear weapons at each other? Thank goodness that did not happen. Now, three other countries that have nuclear weapons. And those are the countries that scares the West. And they are Russia, China, and North Korea. Many folks say the reason that the United States and the West does not treat North Korea like they treat India, like they treat Iran, like they treated Libya, like they treat a lot of other places, is because North Korea says, yes, I got nuclear weapons. No, I ain't giving them to you unless I send them to you. And that's the way that's going to be. So we don't bother them. Iran is looking at the same thing. If I get a nuclear weapon, maybe the US and the rest of the West will have to start treating me like they treat North Korea. That's why they wanted it. And I think they're right about that, but you don't have it yet. That's why they don't want you to have it, because they'll have to give you what we call the North Korean treatment. And the other country that makes up the third country that has allied itself against the West, so to speak, is China. And China is a behemoth. It is way out there, not in terms of nuclear weapons, but it has approaching, along with India, the world's almost half the world's population. It has 1 billion people more than the United States has people. The United States has about 300 and some million, and China has 1,300,000,000 and some million people. So we are worried about those numbers. And we have to also worry about their nuclear capability along with their economic might. They're the number 2, approaching to number 1 economic country on the planet. So they're protected. But those are the 9 countries, Ed, that have nuclear weapons. And you can understand now why it was so important for the West to keep Iran from joining that club. Not that they are worried about nuclear proliferation. They ain't worried about that so much as they're worried about how can I treat people the way I want to treat them and make them say uncle when I want them to say uncle. When they get a nuclear weapon, I have to back off. I have to find a whole nother way of treating them. And I'm tired of that.
Yeah.
So, Iran, you can't have a nuclear weapon. Bottom line.
Well, Val, here's the funny part. We're the only people that ever dropped any on anybody and killed anybody with any.
Absolutely right.
So that brings me to the history part. So if we go back, and we just need to go, like I said, we could go back to World War I, but we can go back even further. There's always been some conflict in the Middle East, at least over the last 2,000 years or so. But let's just go back to 1945 at the end of World War II. And there was pressure to, what are we going to do with Jewish people? And countries did not want to take them in. England, didn't want to. United States didn't want to in large numbers or whatever. And so now, any of the Western countries. So they said, well, we got a place for them. Historically, I can say that I can justify that I can put them in Palestine, create them a state. It's not that many of them, 6, 7 million of them. Throw them there, they'll be fine. And then those people who are living there, who are Muslims and Christians, by the way, we'll just move them out. Who cares? Nobody's going to pay any attention. We'll just move them out. And so that's what happened. So by 1948, let's just be honest, there were people that were already living there. And then some folks from Eastern Europe needed a place to go in Russia, and they dropped them in what is now the state of Israel. And there's been a lot of fighting over a little bit of land. If you add up all the people there, Val, I was trying to find this number, but if you add up the 9 or 10 million people that make up Israelis, and then the other 8 or 9, 10 million that make up Palestinians, you may be talking about less than the number of people that are in the state of Texas. And the whole world's about to blow up over that number. And I know it's not the number, it's about people, right? People need to treat people fairly or whatever. But let's be realistic about it. We put a lot of effort into about 20 million people when there is conflict going on in a lot of places, right? What makes this conflict so special? So, Val, take me back to 1948 and what you know about 48, and take us up to today through the major dates we need to know about so we can try to put this into context.
Well, you were exactly right, Ed. And what happened in 1948 was that after World War II, the British found themselves in control of what we call now the Middle East, because the Germans were using the Middle East as a ratcheting point for their attacks against the rest of the world. We're talking World War II. And the British defeated the Germans in the Middle East. So they claimed rule over this area of the world once the World War had concluded. So they went back to the United Nations, League of Nations, whatever, and decided that, okay, I have this place over here, like the Middle East belonged to them. And yes, we have room to house these people. And all of these people who had been fighting for a Zionist nation said, we can't go to just any place. I'll tell you where we got to go. Jerusalem has to be in our future, and we got to be here. And the Bible says that we belong here and this and that and the other. And so they convinced them to give them that portion of Palestine that now has been called Israel. It's one of the 2 religious states on the planet: Israel and the Vatican. These are two religious nations. That's the only purpose they are there, because of the religion. They ain't got nothing to do with race. Has nothing to do with, a little bit to do with geography, but primarily having to do with religion is the establishment of the state of Israel. It was in 1948. Well, what about all of these other Arab countries living around the state of Israel? Israel is afraid to death. The United States says, don't worry, I got your back. The UK says, don't worry, I got your back. If they attack you, they attack me. So they give Israel all of these weapons. Oh, tons of them, man. They were so powerful that they had a war in 1967 that only lasted 6 days. They call it the 6-Day War. And Israel defeated all of the Arab nations together, beat them all. They took the Golan Heights from Syria, the Gaza Strip from Egypt, and the West Bank from Jordan. And then there was a UN resolution a little later says, okay, you got to give this back. We got peace in the Middle East now. You got to give these things back to Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. And Israel says, go take a flying flip. I ain't giving nothing back. And they still haven't given it back today. Ed, today is 2025. And they still haven't given it back. And now they're talking about building a golf course and a resort area on the Gaza Strip, where the UN told you to give that back. That wasn't your land. Mm-hmm. And they didn't do it. So that was in 1967. So things went on. And then you had the Olympics, when people got mad and decided to attack all of the Israeli athletes that attended that. And Israel painted that as the world's worst crime, even worse than the genocide on the Native Americans, the genocide on the indigenous people of Australia and New Zealand. It was the worst thing that's ever happened. It wasn't the worst thing that ever happened. It was very bad. It wasn't the worst thing that ever happened. In 1990, we had something called Desert Shield. How did this happen? Saddam Hussein decided to go to the American ambassador and says, hey, Kuwait really belonged to us historically, and we're thinking about taking it back. What do you guys think? And so the ambassador told Saddam, well, I've talked to the people in Washington, and they don't have any problem with that. If you think it's yours, go right ahead. And so Saddam invades Kuwait, and the U.S. says, no, you can't do that. You're attacking another country, and I'm going to get involved. And then we had Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and then we attacked Iraq. And my favorite general, Colin Powell, was used to talk about why we needed to go into Iraq, because they had weapons of mass destruction. And you could see the other diplomats sitting behind him just smirking and smiling as he was talking to the UN folks, telling him that he knew that there were weapons of mass destruction, and they knew they had fed him this lie to destroy his credibility and his career. It was just horrible how that happened. Everybody knows what happened after that. So what happened after that, then you got in between the World Trade Center. Osama bin Laden decided that I've had enough. A little background on that is Osama bin Laden came to be a big bad boy because the US of A helped him get rid of the Russians when the Russians wanted to take over Afghanistan. And the United States gave him Stinger weapons to shoot down the helicopters. Afghanistan is so mountainous, without helicopters, you can't do anything. So we had Stinger missiles shooting down the helicopter. The Russians got to get out of there. And Osama bin Laden says, oh, thank you so much, US of A. You're a good guy. I appreciate it. But I got this now. You can leave. And the US of A says, you don't understand. I'm not leaving. And they say, hey, this is my country. You got to go. This is our country. No, I'm not leaving. I help you win this thing, and I got to tell you how to run it now. So Osama said, okay, if that's the way you want it. The next thing you know, you got planes flying into the World Trade Center. Things start changing. That's when Colin Powell and everybody else said this is an Iraqi thing. All 19 people that they identified as part of this were Saudis, but this was an Iraqi war. So it gave the United States carte blanche to go in and attack Iraq and start the Iraq War. And a lot of things happened over the next 20 to 24 years. But the biggest one, Ed, happened in October of last year when we talk about, or October the 7th, when we talk about Hamas attacking and killing a little over 1,000 Israelis. That gave Netanyahu the authority he had been looking for to declare all-out war on Palestinians. And although there were almost about 1,100 Israelis killed, murdered, the Israelis made up for that. I think the total now is right around 50,000.
Yeah.
50,000 Palestinians have been killed. Many of them, most of them are women, children, and the elderly and the infirmed inside of hospitals. And the Israelis see that as justification. And now we're on step Z, where now the Israelis decided to not wait for the Iranians, but attack them and destroy their nuclear weapon creating capability.
Yeah.
The United States can't wait. We join in. Last night, they do bunker busting missiles, attack Iran, destroy their capability of enriching uranium. They say a lot of it had been enriched to 60%. It takes an enrichment of 90% to have weapon grade uranium. And they use that as an excuse to why they went ahead and attacked. But like we said earlier, the real reason they wanted to attack now is they did not want Iran to become another North Korea. Not because of nuclear weapons, but you can't control them once they do have it.
That's right.
And what you're looking for is control.
And it's completely about control. I hear some music in my ear, Val, so we need to take another break. When we come back, I'm going to ask you about what the real risk is to Americans, no matter what happens, whether Iran has a weapon or not, or if this thing continues to blow up, is there a possibility of a larger conflict or whatever? Or do we have to worry about terrorists being on our soil and maybe doing something here? So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
Bro, you gotta stop with that depression stuff.
Escúchame, en esta casa los hombres no lloran.
You all right?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
Thanks for hearing me out, bro. Appreciate it.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
Objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. Val Atkinson is here. It's June 22nd, 2025. we were talking about all those dates, Val, 1945, 48, 67, 90, 2001. I'm like, wait a minute, what year is this? If you happen to be catching us on video, I have on my normal shirt because you can't always blame Canada. It's a funny or a satirical takeoff on an episode of a show called South Park, where they're always picking fun at American politics and how we want to blame everybody else for our problems as opposed to taking responsibility for it. And there's a running gag in there, Val, where Canada is always at fault. And the United States is always wanting to blow Canada up because Canada is always at fault for all the stupid stuff that Americans do, but not Americans themselves. And we kind of find ourselves at that juncture again, Val, where we're blaming somebody else, right? In the clip coming back in, you saw Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, whom he used to call Little Marco, and then Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance, who called Trump a Nazi. You remember that guy? He's the vice president now. Anyway, they're standing there and they're blaming everything that this is Iran's problem because Iran would not acquiesce to the demands of the United States. Now, Val, I said that what I wanted to talk about on the way back was what are the real dangers of the position that we take as Americans? You mentioned the World Trade Center. It took 19 people on 3 airplanes to kill over 3,000 people. There's been people who drove trucks through crowds or shot up military bases. You just name it. Talk to me about what the real danger is of getting ourselves involved in this situation and, what's likely to happen here.
Well, I think Americans in particular and Westerners in general need to be on high alert, especially if you're living in the Middle East right now. But even if you're right here on terra firma in good old US of A, you need to still be vigilant and be aware of your surroundings and what the occasions happen to be. Simply because there are certain people who think that the actions of Israel and the United States of America are 100% wrong. And they don't need a figure like the Ayatollah or a prime minister or anyone else to give them instructions to carry out dreadful and heinous acts. And so you need to be aware of this, that they could grab a vehicle and run it down the middle of people walking down the street, just celebrating a birthday or a holiday. They could be in a concert someplace and have automatic weapons. And everybody knows that the United States is the easiest place to get guns, even automatic weapons. So that's a danger. There are so many dangers, you can't name them all, but be vigilant, be aware of your surroundings, think that things may happen and prepare yourself accordingly for that, because this is a very, very cautious time coming up. And I would tell everybody, be aware, even if you don't have to be a white male Southerner to be the target. You could just be an American. So be very, very careful about what you do over the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, I do want to caution people. They always say, "See something, say something." We really gonna have to take that to heart. Val, here's a map of the Middle East, and the reason why I have this up, I want to show how close Iran is to other places. There are 40,000 Americans in the Middle East stationed right now on military assignment, and all of them are within 2,000 miles of Tehran, right? So, I mean, a lot of them are within miles, like 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 miles from Iran. A lot of troops, right? So the other thing that I fear, Val, is I know Donald Trump, in that clip I showed on the way back in, said that this was not about regime change. But you have to know that if you cause enough upset within a country, it will lead to regime change. I want somebody to tell me that the destabilization that Israel caused in Syria did not lead to regime change. They deliberately caused destabilization in Syria to cause regime change. Now, some of that change was also because people were tired of al-Assad, right? And they got rid of him. And the same has happened in Egypt when they had, that Arab Spring, right? And they threw off people there. Iraq is a lot different than it used to be, and Saddam is gone. Whatever, you can replace these dictators, these figureheads, or whatever, but what are you going to replace them with, right? So here is maybe a harder question to try to answer, because we turn so insular towards the United States or whatever. But we did talk about the fact that Iranians are primarily Persian and not Arab. They're primarily Shia and not Sunni. They have different sensibilities. They think that Saudi Arabia is a terrible state and almost criminal. I do know that over the last couple of years, they have relaxed some of the rules on women wearing hijab, and more women are going without head coverings in Iran and places like that. And people were moving away from being so religious in Iran, even though the Ayatollah is still in charge. They were internally making some moves towards being less restrictive and less religious. I just saw a documentary the other day about that. And what irks me is that Americans don't know or pay attention to those things. That Iran was probably moving in that direction anyway. They were probably going to, unseat the Ayatollah at some point or whatever. Why is it on our timetable that it has to be done or whatever? And so, despite Donald Trump saying he isn't for regime change, everything he's doing is going to lead to that, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what's going to happen. So, again, the long way around is, tell me how well Iraq is doing after we invaded Iraq. That's really stable now, right? And it's in the U.S. orbit, right? And or am I mistaken? Are they still having trouble there?
They are still having trouble. I mean, nothing is perfect in the Middle East anywhere. And if there are planners and strategists in the U.S. who think that they can effect regime change, go in and change things, and have some puppet government taking their orders from Washington and everything is running fine, that day's been over hundreds of years ago. It doesn't happen that way anymore. People are too smart for that. They look right through that, and they know when you have put a puppet in there to run them and they're taking their orders from Washington, and you've got to come in with an iron fist in order to make that happen. It's not going to happen anymore. All you're doing is setting up a situation that you'll have revolt after revolution after uprising. It's just not going to happen. So people need to stop even entertaining those thoughts of going down that road. It's just not going to happen. We have got to get to a point, Ed, here in the West, that we can live with other people on this planet without them being in our orbit and without them taking orders from Washington. We don't think that that's possible yet. So therefore, this is, always somebody at our throat or we're at somebody else's throat, because this is an opportunity for us to get more people in our orbit or have more people taking their orders from Washington, and we won't be satisfied. It seems to me that some people think that we won't be satisfied until we have all of the people on planet Earth in our orbit taking orders from Washington.
Well, anyway, I know that, the baby Jesus wants Donald Trump to be in charge of the world, and JFK is coming back, and JFK Jr. and all that stuff. There's some folks out there that believe some crazy stuff, and one of the crazier things I think they believe is what you just said, is that everybody should be in the U.S.'s orbit, and that there's no other way around it. Which brings up me to the last topic I want to talk about today, is the domestic repercussions of this, right? So let's take a look at Tucker Carlson talking to Ted Cruz, and I think it'll bring it.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah,
how could you not know that? It's not even, you don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump.
I'm not saying that.
So Val, Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox News. Tucker Carlson is not our friend. He's a bigot, and he's not a nice person, and so on and so forth. But he challenges Ted Cruz to say, "Hey, Ted, how many people live in Iran? What are the religious and political questions in Iran? Whatever. Why should we go over there and fight a war with these people?" Right? Tucker Carlson, of all people, who I hate, who believes that white people are being replaced. He believes in white replacement theory. He makes fun of your black history, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Don't like him. But he had a good question to Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz did not know there's almost 100 million people that live in Iran. He didn't know, the religious implications. He didn't know about, any of this stuff going on internally in Iran. So that means that there are people on the right, including people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have been questioning whether or not we get into another conflict in the Middle East, because they say that Donald Trump promised that he was a man of peace. He was not going to go to war. And supposedly, Val, here's the kicker. Supposedly, we're spending too much money on all that stuff. I saw a statistic this morning. It said it took over 120 planes to carry out that mission at those 3 sites, between bombers, fighter planes, refueling planes. So you're talking about millions and millions of dollars it cost to get those planes over there to bomb Iran. And so domestically, there's supposed to be this push to save money and all this other stuff. Again, another long question. If we're supposed to be worried about Americans and America first and domestic whatever, blah, 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 will this be enough to cause enough of a fracture in the MAGA movement to try to finally maybe put a stake in the heart of that thing and kill it? Or will it just be a bump in the road, and then, they'll keep being as crazy as they've always been?
Bump in the road. I can answer that real quick. That's all it's going to be, because rational thinking and logic ain't what's pushing these MAGA folks. So you can't come at them with that kind of stuff. They've told us a long time ago, and they give us examples every day, that logic and reason ain't what makes us make the decisions and come up with the conclusions that we do. They are about the business. They've been sold on the idea that there are folks who don't look like them who are trying to take their place. There are folks who don't practice the same culture they practice that are trying to take their culture away. So as long as they have been fed that, as long as they believe that, you can feed them anything. I mean, you can forget about culture. What's one of my favorite sayings? You just been quoting Tucker Carlson. I'm going to quote George Will, who used to write for the New York Times. He's conservative too. And he says you can't use logic to move someone off of a position that they arrived at illogically. And so we can forget about these MAGA folks trying to look and say, oh my goodness, the deficit is going up and we spent how much money bombing Iran? Oh, that doesn't meet out well. So let's change it. Come on. These guys don't think that way. Not 1 second. They'll come up with an excuse why it's okay to spend $47 billion to bomb Iraq, but you can't give a $47 raise to somebody on SNAP. 47.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on again, Val. Here's the thing, that whole big, beautiful bill, and what's likely to come out of the Senate. What's going to happen is you'll see the destruction of more federal agencies and programs. We already know the Voice of America is off the air, and that's gone. We know that there's a move to make sure that FEMA is over by the end of hurricane season. That's what the president announced last week, and there was a mass resignation from FEMA this week that people don't even realize. The whole apparatus that runs the call center at FEMA resigned on Wednesday. And it didn't get any play in the media. Nearly everybody from the Southeast region, where all the hurricanes hit, have resigned, all the leadership, or retired, or took early retirement. So if anything happens, God forbid, about staging water or getting tarps to cover people's houses and all the things that FEMA does do, is going to be out the window, but also giving that first early money, when there's a disaster, that's all going to be gone. But there will be a tax cut, and you have bombed Iran. So I guess we need to rejoice, Val, that that Iran now has 3 facilities that may or may not be working. Here's the last part of that, Val, with Iran. I guess is I was reading. Not in the American news. I can't remember what country newspaper I was reading, but the nuclear agency that oversees nuclear weapons was already monitoring those 3 facilities. And IAEA already had people there. And that's where Tulsi Gabbard got the information that they were not far enough along to produce a weapon. But Benjamin Netanyahu can go on TV and say, oh, no, they're days away. And then you get Donald Trump parroting exactly what Netanyahu says, and we're supposed to believe that. So that's why I have a hard time believing when Donald Trump says he's trying to improve the economy and help out the common guy. I don't believe that at all. He's trying to sell a $499 cell phone that he says is going to be $49 a month for service that only costs $20 a month. And it's supposed to be gold plated. And he said this week, and again, it went under the radar because we were consumed with whether or not we were going to bomb Iran. But he says that he is the only person that can get the economy straightened out. So you got to pass this big, beautiful bill. The Senate has to do it. The near identical bill that the House had. But guess what, Val? You already said it. It's supposed to cut Medicaid and Medicare. His own constituents that voted for him would be decimated from it. But they have completely blinders on and won't leave him for whatever reason. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But I guess cults do work, right, Val?
Oh, yeah.
You can become a strong man and get people to follow you to do anything else. And just ask Adolf Hitler.
Oh yeah.
He had plenty of people who you thought were reasonable people who were willing to do anything for the dictator. Anyway, we could talk forever about this stuff. And you see, we had a plan to talk about some stuff, Val, but we threw it out the window and just had a conversation. And I think it's important. I hope that people are having conversations in their house, at their dinner table, with their children, with their friends about what this really is about. That this is about trying to westernize everybody else, that we have no respect for any other people. Now, Val, some people may be okay with that. But I'm not. I'm not, because I've been around the world and I've been around other people. Everybody doesn't have the same sensibilities I do. People don't like the same food I eat, whatever. No, everybody should not be eating McDonald's and KFC and watching reality TV. That's not going to make the world better. I guess I know, and you know this too, Val, that all civilizations come to an end. The Romans aren't the preeminent civilization anymore, and that's for a reason.
The Romans, the Third Reich,
all of them. Yeah,
the British Empire.
British Empire. So I suspect the American Empire will end at some point. I'd like for it not to end while I'm alive. So here's the question I was asking at the end. So what in God's name do we need to be looking at this week? What I need to do to prepare myself for this week, Val?
I'll tell you what everybody needs to do. They need to make a note to get involved with what we are calling, Ed, the New Deal. I know you're thinking about Franklin Roosevelt when you think about the New Deal, but we're talking about the New Deal because we got a media group here that's a part of the New Deal. And you mentioned WENC 1220 on the radio dial, which will come out in August. And there's some other parts that are of the media group that's going to come out before then. One is my blog or op-ed column, the Octogenarian, and you have a column out there as well. There's some other pieces in there that once WENC comes online, we're going to start doing some political ads, having our own place to set them up and get them going all around the state of North Carolina and all around the nation. And there will be a speakers bureau. People need people who know what they're talking about to come out and talk to you about this. But over the weeks and months ahead, you're going to be hearing a heck of a lot more about the New Deal Media Group that has a lot of moving parts to it. And you're going to hear about these moving parts. WENC is just one of those parts. And of course, the podcast that Ed does and with Ed and I do is another part of that. Mm-hmm. So they need to get up to speed. And Ed, I haven't even talked to you about that, but there's going to be something out on a website that people can go to and see the totality of the media group.
Yep.
And how they can access it. And we'll be getting that out to folks pretty soon too.
Yep, exactly. And the reason why, Val, is that because I tried to watch mainstream news this morning and over the last 24 hours, and I was really disappointed at the coverage. People are afraid to say what they mean and mean what they say. So you know as well as I do, the only way to prevent people from being censored is you be the ones do it yourself. Right. If you go to work for somebody, a news outlet, then that news outlet is going to control what you say. I make no bones about it, Val. I'm a liberal. I'm a liberal with some socialist tendencies, and meaning that I believe in helping other people. They in a lot of places they call them social democrats, you know, and other cultures, you know, in Scandinavia, places like that, where they believe you don't have to mistreat people, you know, and still live comfortably. So I think what we need to do is have our own platforms, and that's what we've been trying to do with the deal and with some other programs we're going to have. I think you'll find we'll have a big stable of programs, and we'll even have music, you know, programs or whatever as well. Some smooth jazz and stuff like that we want to add in so that people have other entertainment options and all those things. And we've been working a long time on this, and sometimes, you know, you get pushed over the edge, right, Val? You know, you just get irritated to the point where you say, well, just do it ourselves, and that's what we decided to do. So anyway, I want you to go out and do something good for somebody today, and I really do mean that. And then come back next time for another edition of The Deal, and we'll see you next time. Bye.